Yes, Goretti, go ahead. Goretti, go ahead.
Thank you, Ethan. It's been a very interesting session this afternoon. And one thing I've picked that I have always overlooked is the step number 1 of seeking clarity about the conflict. And just like you've just highlighted the tips of understanding where the conflict is coming from using the myth approach, I do recognize and know for sure that once you have not clarified what the misunderstanding is, resolving the misunderstanding becomes a huge challenge. So moving forward, I believe I'm going to practice more to first understand the conflict in its totality, looking clearly at who is involved, especially whether I am the problem, whether it is the system or whether it's the teams that I'm working with before I embark on resolving the challenge. And I believe once you have clarity on what the challenge is, it becomes much easier and faster to manage or even resolve the conflict.
All right.
Over to you.
Cool. Thank you, Goretti. I appreciate that. Cool. And so Nelson is asking a question here. And how does the me and the myths differ? So let me pull up the presentation so that we are all on the same page. Yeah, I always like those clarifying questions, because if something is not clear, then you deserve to know what is this thing that you're talking about, Ethan. So here is the myths. So here, the me is about you as the person, so to speak. You as the person, that's where the me comes in. Now, the individual is, for example, you could be a manager, okay, and you find yourself embroiled in a conflict. You find you're somehow involved in that conflict. So to analyze, you start with them, okay, what did I do that contributed to this? And this me part, I find it very useful, because sometimes it's very easy to point fingers to other people, individuals, teams, and the like, and we forget to remember what we did wrong or what we contributed to the conflict. And now the individual, you are analyzing and say, oh, okay, so Joanne, because Joanne did not send the report to James and they were quarreling, so that is what triggered the email that came to me as a manager, and now here we are. Okay, so that way you're able to say, and now you're saying, okay, the me, what role did I play? Oh, the email, I blasted so and so without analyzing the situation first. So you're looking at the me there. So I'm just curious, does that answer your question, Nelson? Because you asked a question earlier. Nelson, please confirm if I've answered your question. All right, so Frida has asked some questions, some very useful, very detailed questions, actually. So let me respond to that. Frida is asking on the clarity, what do you do when the other party is not giving all the information necessary to clarify what the disagreement is about? So again, Frida, that has many facets. It has many possibilities or angles to look at that. Number one, how come they are not willing to give you all the information? It could be, of course, they are hiding something, or they don't want to move forward. And there are some people who actually just enjoy the conflict. They'll rather not resolve it. They just like the adrenaline. Now, number two, it could also be how you communicated to them. And it could be that you use not a good tone. And in that case, you may need to, step back, use a different tone. The other third way to look at it is it might mean that the person is really not ready to give you that information now, because in their mental and emotional state, it is so intense that they are not willing to. So the other thing I didn't alert you about is when it comes to conflict, timing and context, they are very, very important. Someone may not give you information because their manager is around. And yet when you put them in a different context where it's one-on-one, they would willingly do that. The other thing that you could be helpful also is sometimes if someone doesn't, if you attempt all strategies and they don't work, sometimes it might be helpful to ask, say, a friend or a colleague, or use some technique to ask that other party or that other person what could actually be going on. They might intimate that information to their friend, but they may not tell you the actual truth. So it's really about you being creative around finding the real issue. Also, the other technique which you might find useful is to poke around. You might be having some assumptions and you say, by the way, would it be fair to assume that what's making you angry is because I asked for the report last night? Then they will say no, or they will say yes. If they say no, so, or should I assume that it is this? They might also tell you, I don't want to talk about it at all now. Say, okay, would another time, so when would be a good time for us to talk about this? So you see, I am prodding, I'm probing, and yet I'm also flexible and creative to keep finding ways, because unless you're clear about what's going on, then you'll be just shooting in the dark. So find a way. Number two, on the issue of barriers, what would you do if the barriers are external to both of you? For instance, someone takes advantage of the lockdown to charge for a service that inevitably can't be delivered. I'm not understanding that to charge for services that inevitably can't be delivered. I'm not understood that. Yeah, if you throw more light, but let me give it a shot. In terms of what would you do if the barriers are external to both of you? Well, because I don't have the context, I'm not able to advise. All I can say though is, there's always a way to negotiate and find a way. And Frida, of course, I can only cover so much around negotiations. Just know, in case having a full-blown program on negotiations, if that's of interest to you, you can type your number in the chat box, and I could get back to you and give you access to that, because there is always a way to renegotiate. Now, if someone is using the barrier, you could also, that is external to both of you, you can also give that person some context. For example, someone says, well, I'm just going to use a different context because I'm not understanding your context here. Someone says, you know what, I'm not able to pay because you can see what's going on. This is how the environment is. You could also counter that and say, look, well, first of all, you acknowledge what's going on. I acknowledge what you're saying. And at the same time, we also, for us to be able to be of service to that particular end, we definitely need to find a way on how you can support us, even if it's with a 60% down payment for us to deliver that, because there is an expense attached to that. The other thing you can do is, which I learned from one of the top FBI negotiators, is to say, okay, so how am I supposed to do that? Meaning you engage the party to find a solution around that particular barrier, that because they could be pushing you into a corner for something that you can't do. So I say, okay, so how am I supposed to do that? Please advise me on how you think I can do that, because you can see it's a lockdown indeed, right? The other question is on acknowledgement. At times people assume that it is done when we reach the point of way forward. How do you bring back the other party if they are not willing to discuss beyond the way forward? Well, again, it's about, you remember yesterday when I was talking about persuasion, one of the core tools I talked about is rapport, creating that relationship. So it's usually also around the issue of you creating a relationship. If they are not willing to discuss beyond the way forward, you can, again, it's about showing them why it's useful. Now you use the persuasion techniques I talked about, and those of you who didn't attend, you can check it out. It's persuasion method 101. You bring it to bear. Say, look, it's important for us, by the way, to, if assuming they refuse, one of the ways you can pull them around, you say, So I'm just curious, what is influencing you not to want to move forward? Again, I'm asking so that I get to know what is holding them back. Because once you know the objection, in sales, we say, once you know the objection, then it gives you the strategy on how to respond. So what's holding them back? That's strategy number one. Strategy number two is to actually sell them on the idea as to why it's important to discuss the way forward. Say, look, by the way, I know you may feel uncomfortable about this, and at the same time, it's useful for us to know where we are coming from. Like this other client, I was talking about the one we had the conflict with. I said, look, by the way, for us, our values are 1, 2, 3, 4 things. May I know what your values are? And then he said, no, but I don't want to discuss that. I just want us to go to the meat of the issue. I said, look, it would be useful for me to know, to appreciate where you're coming from, so that I know what is influencing all these decisions, because if we understand each other, then it will be much easier for us to find a way forward. Well, to put it bluntly, he was still a little adamant. And then later, along the way, said, oh, by the way, one of our values also, just like you, is this. So you notice they were adamant, but because I had also sold the idea and I had also revealed what that way forward would be, they were able to communicate somehow, okay? Then Goretti says you can create a follow-up session during the way forward, then you'll meet after. Brilliant idea, Goretti. Yeah, so because sometimes people are not ready now, timing, context, they are very important. Sometimes a person is hurt or they are feeling uncomfortable, but yet once they sleep over it, they feel a bit better. Frida, those were it means you've really been following this session in detail. I'm so impressed. Well done on those wonderful questions, Frida. Nelson says, I still haven't got it crystal clear. Should I say me refers to myself, looking at myself, while individual sees me in the official array or looking from outside? Okay, Nelson, I understand your question now. So the me refers, yes, to yourself. Then the individual, you're talking about other individuals who are involved in the conflict. Yes, that's what I mean. Does that make sense now, Nelson? And Frida, please type in the chat box if what I've said makes sense or if it's helpful in any way. Let me see. Nelson says, yep, thank you. All right, good. I'm glad that it's now clear. Frida, please type in the chat box. Let me know if, thanks, my questions have been answered. Great. Well done, Frida. I'm impressed that, you asked 3 questions in one go and detailed. I'm impressed, very, very impressed. Well done. Okay, cool. So